So last week we was in chapter 18, and you kind of need to know what was in chapter 18 because what's in chapter 19 kind of goes with it in one of the instances. So 18, I'm just going to read the title headings again. The title heading, God avenges his own. It says, keep in prayer, don't faint, don't give up on praying. Remember, I'm kind of trying to jog your memory. The Pharisees and the Republicans, the Republicans went in there, or the Pharisees went in there and prayed, God, thank you for not letting me be like the publicans. You remember out loud? And then let the children come was another title heading. He rebuked his disciples for not letting the children come to him. A ruler's love of money, and this is the one I wanted to talk about because there's another part in here in 19 that kind of goes with this, the love of money. So, the ruler comes up and asks Jesus, how do I inherit eternal life? And Jesus pretty much tells him, you got to live this way, this way, this way. And he named out the first, 4 or 5 commandments of the 10 commandments. And he goes, well, I've been living up to that. And then Jesus adds to it, that money you love so much, you need to give all that money away and follow me. And then it says that he turned around sorrowful because he was real rich. He was, it kind of implies that he wasn't going to give up his money. So, and then he goes in and says, it's hard for it. What was it? It's a camel through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get in heaven. So remember that when we get to one of these other things we talk about. Jesus also talks about his coming death, and he heals the blind man. What was the blind man's name? It was in it ain't in here, it's in a different gospel. She knows it. I can't remember. Susan, what was the blind man's name?
Oh, blind Bartimaeus.
Bartimaeus. Remember we met Bartimaeus, and then you're moving on to chapter 19. So start with chapter 19, verse 1. And Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. That's where he just came from, passed through Jericho. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was a chief among the publicans and was rich. So just to refresh your memory, if some of y'all are new, the publicans were tax collectors or chief sinners, but in this instant is a tax collector. And where he was at was it's known for being pretty wealthy. So it's known for having good growth. You could plant all year round. There was a lot of people there. So Zacchaeus, how he obtained this job, he would go to Rome. Rome would say, I need this much money from this group. And they would bid on it. A group of people would bid on it. Say, well, if you need this much money, I can get you this much money. Or I can get you this much money. And whoever had the highest bid would get the job. And what they would do is go around to each person and collect taxes from them. And they had some wild taxes. You had taxes for breathing air. You had taxes for catching fish. You had taxes for, the certain crops that you planted. So what they would do is tax them to death. And then whatever you got over what you were supposed to give to Rome, you get to put it in your pocket. So what it's telling you by saying that this chief publican Zacchaeus was rich, it means he was crooked. That means he's been, bending people over and taking them to the cleaners or whatever. Okay, so we got all that out of the way. Verse 3, and he sought to see Jesus, who he was, and could not for the press because he was little in stature. So, he didn't have a press pass, I guess. I'm just kidding. So Jesus is coming through, and obviously he's heard about Jesus and going and being friends with sinners. And, even one of Jesus's disciples was a tax collector, okay? So obviously this tax collector has got wind of Jesus and wants to meet him, or at least wants to see him, okay? So, he's a wee little guy, is what he says. Small in stature means he was a short little guy. And just to bring up another point, if you have been beating these people up and taking all their money and there's a crowd, you ain't going to want to run out in the middle of this crowd, especially being a little guy, because you're going to get every elbow to the face and, yeah, they're going to whip up on you. So what does he do? We'll see what he does. And he ran before and climbed. This is verse 4. He climbed up a sycamore tree to see him, for he was to pass that way. So obviously he sees the trail where he's coming. He goes, you know what? I can go and climb up this tree and maybe I can get a glimpse at him. So I just want to point out one thing. In the Bible, just a few chapters ago, it says you should be humble like a child. Well, if you are a chief tax collector, you ain't going to be running around climbing trees looking like an idiot, for one. This is a humbling thing to do like a child would do. This is, if you think about it, in the old days when, you had baseball games and whatever, kids would climb up into the trees because they were smaller than everybody else and they would be able to see what's going on. So, I think about that when I hear this, this little guy climbing up a tree. And you got to know this has got to be humiliating to him, especially in a minute when Jesus walks over there and says, "Hey, Zacchaeus, what are you doing up?"
You up there in that sycamore, all that crowd now.
That's got to be embarrassing.
I love this. Everybody knows I love this.
Okay, so he's going to climb up the tree to see Jesus pass by. Verse 5, and when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said unto him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must abide at thy house.
I'm coming to your house.
They already knew he was looking for him.
Jesus just spotted him out of that.
Zacchaeus didn't know Jesus was looking for him. Jesus knew that Zacchaeus was going to be there probably.
Yeah.
But Jesus goes over there, and this is the only time that you're going to see Jesus invite himself to somebody's house. It reminds me at the end of the book, at the end of Revelations, it says Jesus is at the heart's door knocking, and you got to let him in. He's not going to just knock over he ain't going to just crash the door in. He's going to knock at that door, and you got to let him in. So this is what I think about when I hear this. Jesus is saying, hey, I want to come to your house. Come down, hurry up and come down. I want to go, I must abide at your house today.
Well, if you look at that word, where it says, I must abide at your house, in the Greek, that was translated, it is necessary.
It's necessary.
It is necessary to meet at your house. So he should have knew then he was in trouble.
Well, Zacchaeus is a rich man, just like the rich man in the other parable. Zacchaeus wasn't going and asking Jesus. Jesus come to him.
Come to him.
And Zacchaeus, you'll see later that Zacchaeus gives it up willingly. He wasn't asked to give it up because Jesus knows his heart and knows that the money don't have a stronghold on him like it did the other guy. So, and Zacchaeus is a sinner. He knows he's a sinner. He knows he's been bending people over. The other guys live by the law. If you remember, he says, you got to live this way. He goes, yeah, I've been living this way since I was a kid. Well, it's going to take more than just living this way. So that just goes to show you how people, if somebody was growed up in church their entire life, they're hard to get. Okay, to get back on the story, we just, Jesus just went to Zacchaeus and said, come down, it's necessary for me to come to your house. And what does Zacchaeus do? Verse 6, and he made haste and came down and received him joyfully.
Yes.
He joyfully received him. So when I think about it now, when I was lost, I used to be so embarrassed to try to go to the altar. But if you really think about it, You know, I'm the sinner. You know, if I had to meet Jesus face to face at that altar in a crowd, the crowd ought to be saying to Jesus, are you really gonna, did you died for this guy? You know what I mean? Jesus ought to be the one that's ashamed to receive you. You should be joyfully, like Zacchaeus, joyfully receiving Christ. Okay, verse 7, and when they saw it, they all murmured, saying, and this is when they saw it, this is the other people, the Pharisees, the Jews that, you know, the ones that passed judgment. When they saw it, they murmured, saying that he was gone to be a guest with a man that is a sinner. So this is how we do. You know, why aren't you hanging out with him? He's a drunk. Why are you going over there? Back in this day, they thought if you hung out with a sinner that it was going to rub off on you. And you know, I said it a few weeks ago, Jesus ain't something you can get dirty, okay? He's a greater power. That's why he's called the light. That's why if you got darkness that goes up to light, the darkness don't absorb the light. The light displaces the darkness. So if you're dark and you go to Jesus, you're not going to make him dark. You're going to get some light off of it. That's how it works. And back then, they thought if you hung out with somebody that was a sinner or something like that, they thought that you would get nasty from it. That's why they had all these cleaning rituals before you could go back into the temple and whatnot.
I never heard this story before.
Really?
The story of Zacchaeus?
You ain't?
8, and Zacchaeus stood up and said unto the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have taken anything from any man by false accusation, I restore him fourfold. Now here's the kicker. Jesus, we don't know what was said. You know, Jesus is at Zacchaeus' house. I don't know what was said, but, you know, it don't say that Jesus said that he had to get rid of his money, but something in him told him, you know, the Holy Spirit told him that he was a sinner and what he was doing was wrong, and that's something that convicted him. He wanted to give the money back to the people he had stole it from.
Yeah, because he done got saved now. He received it.
He done got saved.
He got saved, so his heart was, yeah.
So one of the other things I wanted to point out, he says, I restore him fourfold. I'm trying to remember the details. I don't have them wrote down, but fourfold is more than what the Old Testament tells you that you need to restore if you did steal from somebody. I think it was 20%. Like if you stole something, you give that back with 20%. But he's going to give it back fourfold. He's going to give it 4 times back. That'd be, if I stole $100 from you, I'm going to give you $400 instead of $120. You know what I mean?
20%.
It was 20%. So, you know what I'm saying? He went over and beyond because of the conviction of being saved. And that's just how it's supposed to be. You know, we don't work for faith. It's when we get saved, we want to do works.
In 1/5, and then he said he would give back 20%.
Is that what your footnotes say? So, moving on, you know, obviously the Holy Spirit's working on Zacchaeus, and he said, you know what? I've messed up. I'm going to give the people back their money, and the ones that I've falsely accusations on, I'm going to, go back 4 times. And Jesus said unto him, This day is salvation come to this house, for so much as he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost. And that's beautiful, because you see, on the other hand, the guy that had lived by the law goes and says, how do I have eternal life? How do I obtain the kingdom? And, he tells him, you need to do this. And he said, I've been doing this. I've been living right. But it's, living right, just don't do it sometimes. You got to put Jesus first. You got to get rid of your stuff. You got to, whatever and And even before that, it says you can't serve God and mammon. Mammon is money. If you're putting money ahead of God, you've got to get rid of it. You got to follow Jesus. And this is exactly what Zacchaeus did when he got saved. It didn't have anything to do with Jesus saying, hey, you got to get rid of your money. It was already on his heart to do right.
That's what made him climb up in that tree, the addiction.
So, okay, so we're going to move on. This next part's called a nobleman's 10 pounds. And when you see 10 pounds, if y'all got a different translation, you may see the word minas. Just to explain, a mina was 1/60th of a talent. If you remember, one of the other Gospels tells a story about the talents. Well, that was a measure of money. So a mina is a 10 pounds. It was worth 3 months' wage. So just keep this in mind. You got a 3 months worth of wage to each one of these people when we get into it. 11, and as they heard these things, he added and spake a parable, because he was nigh to Jerusalem, and because they thought that the kingdom of God should be immediately appear, or should immediately appear. Let me set up the scene for the ones that ain't been here. This is Jesus' last week on earth. This is right there at the end, okay? When he gets to Jerusalem, ultimately he'll be on the cross. By the end of this chapter, we're going to get into the triumphal entry, which would be, the first day, the Palm Sunday is what we go when we do Easter or whatever. So they're looking for, and you got to remember now, the king, when the Messiah comes, they thought that there was supposed to be an earthly kingdom immediately brought down, and they were going to get out from underneath Rome's thumb, and there wasn't going to be, slaves to Rome anymore. And this is what they thought. This is what they were looking for. So Jesus told them this parable. 12, he said, therefore, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. And just to add to this story, not too long from this point in time in history, there were, I forget his name now, but there was a nobleman that went and to set up a kingdom, and the people didn't receive him. So this is going to kind of hit home. This really happened. This is a very historical event, and this would get their gears turning on the whole situation. So he went to receive himself a kingdom and to return. 13, and he called his 10 servants and delivered them 10 pounds and said unto them, occupy till I come. So each one of his 10 servants got 10 pounds. That's 3 months' wage. And this word occupy, this means to, use it, to make use of it, to make it good, like invest it or to, make it grow, open up a business, whatever, occupied. I'm trying to think of a good word. Anybody got a new translation, because it uses a different word?
Which
Verse 13. Business or trade with it. Minas, yeah. Yeah. So if you got a King James that says occupy till I come, and that confuses you, it's to do business, to make this money grow. You need to make it work for you. Invest it, do something. Minas is a 3 months wage. It's a 1/60th of a talent. It's a measure of money. It's a measure of money. It's 3 months worth of your money. So get this. The guy goes out. He's going to set up a kingdom. He says, I'm going to give y'all 10, the same measure of money. Every one of y'all across the board are getting the same amount. When I go, I'm going to establish the kingdom, or, get that going. And when I get back, I'm going to, check on y'all. 14, but his citizens hated him and sent a message after him saying, we will not have this man to reign over us. And that really happened in history. This guy come over to set up a kingdom and nobody liked him. And this is kind of, this is exactly what happened to Jesus. He's come to set up a kingdom and the Jews didn't accept him. And this is kind of his point. 15, and it came to pass that when he was returned, having received the kingdom, then he commanded these servants to be called unto him, to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Okay, so that kind of explains in the earlier verses. You all understand what was going on. When he got back, he called the men back. He wants to know how much they gained from the money that they gave him, that he gave them. 16, then came the first, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 10 pounds. So this guy's mina earned him 10 minas in the period of time he was gone. He took what God gave, or the Lord or the guy gave him, and he gained it tenfold. It worked to his. He made 10 times what he was given with the amount that he was given. 17, and he said unto him, well, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in very little, have thou authority over 10 cities. 18, and we're going to go back and talk about this a little bit. 18, and the second came, saying, Lord, thy pound has gained me 5 pounds. And he said likewise to him, be thou also over 5 cities. And another came, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin. For I feared thee, because thou art an austere man. Thou takest up that thou layest down. They takest up that thou layest not down, and reapest that thou didst not sow. It is. So the third guy fears him. He fears this guy that just left so much that he didn't take the 10 pounds that the guy gave him. He just held on to it, because when he gets back, if I messed up and lost this 10 pounds, he'd probably have my head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it up in a napkin, because this guy, and this is the guy's opinion now. This ain't how the guy really was. The guy fears him and just feels like that he wants something from places that he didn't work for it, and he would he take us from where he didn't sow.
Amen.
He's saying pretty much he's a thief, and he's taken from people where he didn't. Anybody got a newer translation, because it really explains it a whole lot better. 21.
For I feared you, because you are an austere man. You collect what you do not deposit and reap what you do not sow.
Yeah. So everybody understands what this guy's, the third guy, this is how he thinks about this guy. So the first one took and, gained 10 times the amount. The second one gained 5 times the amount. And the third one was so scared of the guy, he didn't even try. He just kept the money and didn't want to, he didn't want to lose it. And he said unto him, 22, out of thine own mouth will I judge thee. He goes, if this is what you think about me, I'm going to judge you according to that. If you think I'm a wicked man, I'm going to be a wicked man, because that's what you think I am. Thou wicked servant, thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up that I laid not down, and reaping that I did not sow.
Can I read this?
You can.
Verse I would judge you, you wicked servant. You knew that I was an austere man, collecting what I did not deposit and reaping what I did not sow. He said, why then you not put my money in the bank, that at my coming I might have collected it with interest.
Yeah, I ain't read that far, but yeah. I'll read that part too.
Well, I just,
Yeah. It makes a whole lot more sense out of the newer translation. So, just get this. The guy probably ain't really like this. This is the guy, the third guy's, the way he feels about him. So that's why he did what he did. It's God ain't like this, but he is like this if you want him to be like this. If you think he's like that, that's how he'll be towards you. 23, and he already read it, but I'm going to reread it. Wherefore, then gavest not thou my money into a bank, that at my coming I might have required my own with usury. And this usury is interest. He goes, you didn't even take the money I gave you and put it in the bank where it was safe and it would gain interest by being in a bank. You just rolled it up in a napkin. And he said unto them that stood by, take from him the pound and give it to him that hath 10 pounds. And he said unto him, Lord, he hath 10 pounds. So get this. The guy that didn't have, he didn't take the money and make it back, he didn't do nothing with it. He rolled it up. He was scared he was going to lose it. He says, take it from him and give it to the one that done the best. 26, for I say unto you that unto every one which hath shall be given, and from him that hath not, even that he hath shall be taken away from him. And that's exactly how it's going to be. Every one of us is given the gospel to share with everybody. And I think this is talking about the Bema judgment. The Bema seat, it's an award ceremony. It ain't a judgment. If you're saved, these 10 people are, God's people that are saved. God gives you the gospel. He gives you faith. He gives you all this stuff. He gives everybody across the board the same thing. What I have is the same thing you have, the same thing you have, the same thing you have. We all have the same thing. So why are some of us preachers and some of us just sit at home and watch preaching on TV? This is what he's talking about. When the Bema seat ceremony comes up, the stuff that you should have been doing, you're not going to be rewarded for it. And it talks about this, and this Bema, and I want to call it judgment, but it come from what's that? Where they do the triathlon stuff.
The what?
The triathlons and all the Olympics. It was like when you go through the Olympics or whatever it was back then. I don't think it was called Olympics. Anyway, if you were in a thing where you were competing with other people, and you got like first, second, third, you got different awards for different things. So this is kind of what this is. It's the same word for that. So it's different crowns. It's a crowning ceremony. So you got the people that took what God gave them across the board and used it to build up the kingdom. So when you get to heaven or get to that ceremony, you're going to get a bunch of crowns. And it even says you're going to come back and you'll be awarded, and you'll help. You'll come back with him, and can't remember how it's worded, but if you have just slumbered away all of the things that God has gave you and you barely get in by the skin of your teeth, what you do get is going to be given to somebody else. There's going to be different levels in heaven. So this is, it's confusing, but, it gives us a drive to want to do better. If, we don't work to get a higher spot in heaven, we want to work because we're saved, and it's the works that add to the kingdom. And he's saying you're gonna you're going to be rewarded for adding to that. You're going to be rewarded for doing good. And I think of the steward. When you go back a few chapters, the steward, being the good steward over things, and that's what it is. If you take everything that God's give you, and you do what you're supposed to be doing with it, you're going to be rewarded for it. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing with it, it's going to be taken from you and given to somebody else. That don't mean you're not saved.
Your heart ain't where it ain't where it's supposed to be or needs to be. If your heart is where it needs to be and where it should be, you don't want to see nobody. I don't care if it's your worst enemy. I don't care what. Go to hell. You don't want to see them burn.
And we're going to talk about the actual judgment, the great white throne judgment is what the next part's talking about. 24, and he said unto them that stood by, take from him the pound and give it to him with 10 pounds. And he said, I read all the way down to 27, I'm sorry. 27, but those mine enemies, which would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me. We always think of Jesus all meek and mild and loving, but if you put him in a position to where you are scared of him, or you tempt him, or you don't accept him, this is where it's going to be on his second coming, the judgment. This is a picture of judgment when you don't accept him. Bring him in front of me and slay him, and it's scary. I think about the big church that does that walk. What is it? Where they do the Bema seat, the great white throne judgment at the end, and they throwing them in the fire. Yeah, judgment journey. I'd imagine it's going to be real close to something like that, according to the way I read it. So it's very scary, and Jesus is going to be there, and he can't say that one belongs to me. Because if he belongs to, if you belong to Jesus, you ain't going to be in that judgment to start with. You're going to bypass that whole thing.
I've been told the journey is like super scary, but amazing all the time.
It's the end of time.
Judgment journey.
Really, just.
It's something that you want to me personally, I want to see it one time.
Yeah.
And
Every year.
I took a whole bunch of people to it.
Every year it gets better. It does. And they add to it. Every year they add and add.
About Judgment Journey.
The end where they want to save people.
Yeah, they're trying to scare you.
They're scaring people into salvation.
People leave really saved or thinking they got saved.
Because they were scared.
You know what my husband said? It really does make you wonder, really walk around.
I guarantee you there's
That's
people.
a bad thing to
Yeah.
walk around thinking you're saved.
It is.
To take that judgment journey and bring it into around the middle of the year. They don't need to have it around October like they do, because people's looking at it as Halloween.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, God showed me that, and I had just got saved.
Well, see, that's one of the reasons I don't go is because I've had so many people actually tell me that, it's a good thing to do. It's amazing. Especially if you truly believe. But I've also been told that, 90% of the people that go think it's, basically a Halloween.
That's because
Well,
it's
it's
at
not,
that time
it doesn't
of the
matter
year.
what other people think, it's
Yeah.
what you think
But
when you get
but
there.
see, the thing
Somebody's
is,
How
gonna make
about the-
something out of everything.
How about the
Oh, yeah.
sun?
It's good. It is good. It's good. There's a few things. There's a few things, like you said, the false feeling of being saved is scared, and you can't sell people fire insurance. They've got to be led by the Holy Spirit. You can't scare them into it. But I guarantee you, there's people actually been saved from that because it opens their eyes. So you take the good with the bad, but it does bug me a little bit because at the end of everyone, everybody raise their hand if you want to accept Jesus, and I'm going to pray a prayer for you, salvation, and that kind of stuff.
Scared because they've been,
That kind of stuff kind of bothers me because I feel like you need to be drawn by the Holy Spirit. That's what we kind of teach, and that's how we've been taught. So, what are we looking like on time? What time is it? 10 till. We're going to keep going. The next part of this is the entry into Jerusalem, or some of y'all may say the triumphal entry. So you see all the different country, like the comparisons or the different things that are going on. He tells this story in contrast to Zacchaeus. Verse 28. And when he had thus spoken, he went before, ascending up to Jerusalem. Okay, so this is the last part. This is ascension to Jerusalem. And if you look at a map, it's probably going down from where he's at. Anytime you see going up to Jerusalem, it's because the elevation of Jerusalem is higher than everything else around. So we're elevation, not northeast, southwest. So he's ascending, and ascending is a good word because that means he's going up. 29, and it came to pass when he was come nigh, came close to Bethphage, whatever, and Bethany. Okay, Bethphage means house of unripe figs. Bethany means house of figs or house of affliction. I think it's house of figs in this instance, but at the mount called the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying, Go ye unto a village over against you, in the which at your entry ye shall find a colt tied, whereon yet never man sat. Loose him and bring it hither. Okay, so they're going in between Bethphage and Bethany. I'm thinking of like a crossroads right here. Mm-hmm. Hey, y'all go, there's going to be a colt tied up. Y'all go get it and bring it back to me. 31, and if any man ask you, why do you loose him? Thus shall ye say unto him, because the Lord hath need of it. And again, when you get there, and I want to add that no man's never rode him. So y'all know how hard-headed donkeys are. You go there, and I'm pretty sure this old not trained donkey, and the other one says it's a colt and a mama's there with it. So it's a colt. It's a young donkey. I'm pretty sure these guys is fighting this donkey tooth and nail trying to get it over there to Jesus. I just picture this. The guy says, why are you untying my donkey? He goes, the Lord need of it. He has need for it. Don't you wish you could go sit in a new car and say, hey, the Lord had need of this, and he throw you the keys? Okay, so, the Lord had need of it. 32, and they that were sent went their way and found even as he had said unto them. And as they were loosing the colt, the owners thereof said unto them, why loose ye the colt? Why are you taking my donkey? I gotta turn the page. And they said the Lord had need of him. And they brought him to Jesus, and they cast their garments upon the colt, and they sat Jesus thereon. My dad used to raise horses and train horses, and donkeys are way hard-headeder than horses. They will bite you, kick you. They will just flat out mean. So for these people to drag this donkey over here and for Jesus to just sit up on it and it be calm, it's a miracle in itself. I'm just saying. It said that no man has ever sat on this thing before. So this ought to be, wow, Jesus just sat on this thing and it ain't going completely berserk. 36, and and as he went, they spread their clothes in the way. Okay, so when the guys brought the donkey, they put their garments across him. This would have been the big robes that they had on. Jesus got on him. And as Jesus is walking with the donkey down to Jerusalem, they're throwing their clothes out in the path. And they're also throwing out palm branches, if you'll read in one of the other Gospels. That's why it's called Palm Sunday. And when he was come nigh, or got close to, even now at the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice, praising God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen. I just want to say, everybody that has been talked about that's following Jesus by now, this is the woman, this is Mary and Martha. This is Lazarus, the one that was dead, will be with him. The blind guy, what was his name again? Bartimaeus would have been there. You think of all these people that Jesus has healed and they were following him. So all these people are there. And that's why it wants you to think about, for all, it says for all the miracles that they had seen. So think about all these people Jesus has helped in all the Gospels. We're talking about just Luke now, but we're thinking about all the stuff in all the other Gospels. And it says somewhere, I think it's in Revelation, I can't remember where it was, but it says if everything that Jesus was done in his 3 years, there was no books that contain all the stuff that he done. How was that written? Y'all have heard that before. So you think about all the stuff and all the people that were there that Jesus helped. and that multitude of people that was with them. They were saying, "Blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And this is actually from the Old Testament. This would have been given Jesus to a Pharisee. This would have been calling Jesus the Messiah, okay? Because they would have looked back in the Old Testament, and this is a prophecy from, I might have to look at my footnote right here. Where was this prophecy from?
118:26.
Psalms 118. So, all the Pharisees and most of the Jews would have known what this meant. Hey, Messiah's coming. And you got to remember, when you hear the word Messiah's coming, you thinking, hey, Rome ain't fixing to be ruling us no more. 39, and some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said to him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And in this instant, master means teacher or rabbi. Rebuke your disciples. And the reason I said what I said is because when they're saying this chant or whatever they're saying to a Pharisee, it's like calling him the Messiah. You better shut your people up because they're fitting to get all of y'all in trouble. This is blasphemy, is what he's saying here, and a whole lot less words. But this is their thoughts, okay? 40, and he answered and said unto them, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. And what Jesus means by this is prophecy. I can't stop what's going on. This can't be stopped. This is going to happen. And if I tell them to shut up, the stones are going to start crying out, okay? And I really literally think that the stones would start crying out. If you can hit a stone and water comes out of it, for surely it can make a noise, okay?
Yes.
So, he probably meant it. And he said it just to prove a point. Hey, this is prophecy. This has got to happen, brother. I can't shut them up. 41, and when he was come near, he beheld the city and he wept over it. And when it says he wept, it really literally means he just cried out. He was just brokenhearted over the city, okay? In one of the other Gospels, it was the shortest verse in the New Testament. Jesus wept. It's 2 words. I don't remember which Gospel it was, but it's the same part, shortest verse in the whole book, New Testament. 42, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, even though at least in this day the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. He's just brokenhearted because they should have known by what was going on. It was in their Bible. I don't know. It was called a Tanukh or something like that. But it was they all knew this was going to happen, and they didn't accept him. They didn't accept him, and it broke Jesus' heart. And this is why. 43, for the days shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee on every side. 44, and thou shalt lay thee even with the ground. That means they're going to wipe the whole thing down even with the ground. And thy children within thee. And they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. In 70 AD, this is just a few more years, Rome is going to come in, and they're going to start obliterating this place. And it makes me feel like if they would have accepted Jesus, this wouldn't have happened. And Jesus is weeping because they didn't accept Jesus, and this is what's going to happen. And Jesus called it. When Rome come through, they obliterated the place. Fires melted the gold in the temple, and it ran down in between the rocks, and they tore the temple down stone by stone to get the gold out from in between them, okay? It was flat, and he had called it way before he even died. He knew what was going to happen. And it broke his heart because he came for the Jewish people. He was a Jew. He came for them, and they didn't accept him. And I say that because we have own family. Your family members are going to be the hardest people that you ever reach. Even Jesus' own family didn't accept him until after he died and come back. They didn't believe it. So what time do we got? Y'all want to do the rest of it, or y'all want to hold out?
It's about 2 after 7.
You want to keep going or no?
Keep going.
Okay. This next part is teaching in the temple. 45, and when he went into the temple and began to cast out that sold therein and them that bought. If you go to one of the other Gospels and you read this part, it says he went into the city. He looked around and went back out to Lazarus and Mary and Martha's house. So he went in, seen what was going on, said Jesus wept. I'm just filling in the gaps here, okay? So he went and slept on it, no doubt praying about it. So this is what happened when he come back. He went in to the temple, began to cast them out, and what I'll read a little bit more and then I'll explain it. So, he's casting everybody out. 46, saying unto them, it is written, my house, and understand, my house, Jesus saying my house. This is putting him into, God, I'm God, this is my house. Is the house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. And this is why we don't sell and trade and do business up in the sanctuary, okay? 47, and he taught daily in the temple, but the chief Pharisees and the scribes and the chief of the people sought to destroy him. And he could not find what they might do, for all the people were very attentive to him. And they could not find what they might do. If you remember in this section, if you go back and read some of the other, things, it was in there where he tossed him the coin and says, who does this coin belong to? Are we supposed to pay Caesar? Or are we supposed to pay, taxes or whatever it is? And he looks at it and he goes, who's on the coin? And he goes, you give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And he dodged the bullet because they're trying to set him up the whole time he's there, trying to accuse him. But get this, just to set up the scene for the ones that don't know. Back in this day, they had this big thing set up, and all these people would come around from everywhere for Passover. I'm talking about this place would have millions of people in it. It was 33-yard square place. The outer side edges of it were for the Gentiles, and then the further inward you got, only the male Jews could go to the center part of it, and then the back part of it you had to be clean Pharisee, all the stuff to go into the Holy of Holies. But get this, these people would come around, and you had to sacrifice a lamb on this day. So the people would bring their own lambs from different places, but these people had done set up these places inside of the temple grounds selling lambs and doves, and they sold doves because if you were poor, you couldn't afford a lamb, so you would sacrifice doves, okay? But they would say, they would look at your sacrifice that you brought, and they would find a blemish on it and say, this one ain't going to work. We'll take it, and, you're going to have to buy one of the animals that we're selling. And then they, here's my money. Oh, well, this ain't the money. This money's not the sacred money we use. You're going to have to go to a money changer. You're going to have to go over here. And when the money changer would change out the money, they would do, your money is not worth as much as our money is, so it's going to take like 3 times the amount of money. So they're gouging them at the money table, and then gouging them because they couldn't use their lamb or their whatever they was going to sacrifice. So this is why Jesus is really upset. They've made a money racket out of it. But that's what's going on. So Jesus comes in, he ties, in one of the other Gospels it says he makes him a whip, ties him up a whip, and he's whipping people. He's flipping over the money changer tables. He's letting out animals. He's whipping folks and getting them, driving them out of the temple. So it's real interesting to see Jesus meek and mild to go berserk and flip over money tables and be whooping on folks. And could you imagine that breaks his heart? He made all of us, and they're in there making money off of folks trying to worship.